Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. On this episode, I'm going to be finishing taking apart the LS1 motor out of the 1LE Camaro and starting to put it back together and hopefully start getting it back into the car. So without further ado, I guess we'll just dive right into this. First off, we are going to be starting by getting all these parts put on that motor. But before we dive into that, I would like to thank our sponsor for all the parts that's sitting behind me. And they are... Oh wait, I'm the fucking sponsor. I'm the one paying for this out of my own pocket. Yeah, anyway, so lots of parts, gotta go in the motor. Okay guys, if you remember from the last video, this is about where I left it off at. And from this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish cleaning off the valley here and the intake runner ports just to try and get it so none of this crap gets down in the motor, because I'm not going to pull the heads off, and then I'm going to pull the oil pump off, what's left of it, and pull the timing chain and gears off so I can get the cam plate off that and pull the cam out. And then on the top here, come back to this, but I'm gonna pull the steam vent tube off here, pull the harness off to the knock sensors, and then get this valley cover off the motor. And I have not decided what to do about the valley cover yet. And why I say that is because this is a 98 motor. For those of you not familiar with the 98 LS1 and also the 97 LS1, they use a different positive crankcase ventilation system than the later models. And to my knowledge, they don't make a replacement hose assembly for that. So mine shot, if you remember from the previous videos, it was crumbling and fell apart. So either I have to make a new one out of parts I find myself, or the other option would be to upgrade this to a LS6 style. And I'm not sure if I'm gonna do that or not, just because I'd have to buy a new valley cover, and that's like $100. I mean, it's not that expensive, but it's just more money I don't want to spend. So either I'm going to have to try and repair the old hose assembly or go with this style. And if you want to know the difference, I can show it to you pretty easily, because the C10 build has the LS6 style. Getting too deep in here, I can show you guys the LS6 style, and it's really basic, really simple. Basically, the PCV system is built in the valley cover, and you have one hose that comes out and into the intake right there. I mean, it is simple. There's nothing else besides that. There is one vent off of the passenger side valve cover that does go into the throttle body right there as well. But that's it compared to the old style, which is a lot more complicated. It's kind of difficult to show you guys this because this is all apart, but to give you an idea about how this works with the 97, 98 style is it starts on one valve cover. This would be the driver's side. It comes off the driver's side and actually flips over, comes along the intake, attaches right here to this, and then splits to a two-port system. One goes here to the one valve cover on the passenger side, and then the other hose runs forward. The PCV valve is actually located inside all this crap here, and then comes along and goes into the intake right there. Same spot where the LS6 style goes into. So that's why I kind of want to upgrade to the newer style. Again, haven't decided which way to go. Kind of make this up as I go. I mean, I have kind of a plan in my head about what I want to do, but as I take things apart and do stuff, sometimes it's like, well, should I go this way or should I go this way? And again, still trying to make up my mind on which PCV system that I would like to do. Anyway, back to the motor. Again, I'm gonna get this cleaned up a little bit before I pull this off, so a bunch of that garbage doesn't go down in the motor, and start getting the stuff pulled off from the motor. Point out to you guys the easiest way I found to clean up the surfaces on aluminum motors so you do not damage the aluminum where the gasket seating surface is. And I just like to use a razor blade and just come past a 90-degree angle. So there's a 90-degree angle, just come towards you a little bit, like a 70-degree towards you. And then I just lightly scrape. And I've already done this, so nothing's gonna really come off, but I like to scrape it, and that takes off most of the crap. And then you just take a rag that's covered in brake cleaner, and then just rub the rest of it off. And you pretty much should get down to a smooth aluminum surface. Sometimes this takes a little bit harder effort with the razor blade, or sometimes it takes a little bit harder effort with the rag. But as you can see, you get a nice smooth surface without cutting into the factory machining. I've taken off the pickup tube to the oil pump, and one thing I'd like to point out, a lot of people on the internet like to say that the pickup tube O-ring is what goes out and causes a loss of oil pressure, and I'd say that's only partially true. Only about 10% of the time of all the oil pump jobs I've ever done is the O-ring to fail. Case in point, on this motor, it's got 130,000 on it, and this motor is 24 years old. And the O-ring is still very, very pliable. You can see I can scrunch it up and it doesn't crack. So again, sometimes these do crack and split and they do cavitate, but for the most part, if you have a loss of oil pressure, it's because the oil pump itself has gone bad. And please remember, before you take your timing chain off, always make sure you align it to top dead center. And on most of these LS motors, there's a notch right here and a notch on the crank gear. So as you can see, the ones at 6 o'clock and the ones at 12 o'clock, you want to just make sure they're pointing each other. Usually you can always tell because the hole right here on the LS1s is pointed at 3 o'clock to the right as well. So should have a hole at 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 12 o'clock. Now this gives you a clear view of the cam locking plate, which that's got to come out as well if you're going to do a cam. So you got to do these 4 bolts, pull those out, and then take the plate off. I'll also point out while I'm here, if you're not doing a cam, but you're doing kind of everything that I'm doing here, it's a good idea to replace this plate anyway, because there's a built-in O-ring on the back. I'll show you when I get it off, that if that leaks, you can have a loss of oil pressure too. So for what this plate costs, it's just a good idea to replace it while you're in there. Okay, a couple of things. First, I'm gonna go with the plate that I was gonna show you guys. And this gasket's pretty much just flat and it's not coming back at all, which that's definitely a good idea to replace that, but that is not my problem. My problem is, even with my dowels in place, I cannot get my lifters to stay up. There are a couple that just do not want to stay up. And this cam wants to slide back because, if you guys remember, I don't have the back cover on there, so that's why it wants to rotate back. But yeah, I can't get the lifters to stay up, but that is not my biggest problem. So I pulled my windage tray off to show you guys my problem. And that right there, that it's not focusing on, is my problem. As you can see, the lobe on the cam is starting to wipe itself apart. And it's not just that one. It is at least half a dozen lobes that are wiping themselves apart inside that motor. So that is what my little ticking noise probably was. Probably the cam and the lifters eating themselves apart. So yeah, you guys are finding this out as I'm finding it out. And so I'm kind of at a loss for words right now what to do. This definitely. Was not in the budget, and so moving forward, I guess have to decide what to do, which obviously it's probably going to be a full engine rebuild, because judging by what the oil pump looked like, enough of that metal probably went through the motor, and it probably damaged the rod and main bearings more than I'm comfortable with. So I'm gonna have to take this thing apart, and that's not gonna be fun because I didn't plan to do that. So I think the next step is gonna be pull the heads off this thing and get the cam out, or I should say get the lifters out so I can get the cam out, get a closer look at it, which I already know what it's gonna need, but this thing's probably gonna end up going on my engine stand now so I can rotate it, so I can take the caps off and get the crankshaft out of it. So next thing is gonna be to pull the heads off and get to it. Fun. Not what I expected, but shit happens. Usually happens to me a lot, but you know, shit happens. All I can do is move forward. This is not gonna be another repeat of the S2000. This is definitely fixable for far less money. And the motor isn't that bad. I mean, yeah, I've got to buy some parts for it, but you know, it's definitely not gonna be $7,000 or $8,000 worth of parts. So I'm gonna definitely fix it. It just depends on what it's gonna cost in the end, how long it's gonna take to get fixed. It could be a couple months before I get the money together to get what I need ordered, because I'm gonna guess cam, lifters, head bolts, head gaskets, and rod and main bearings, roughly probably gonna be another $1,500 off the top of my head. So, and I don't have that right now, so going to have to save up. And I also should point out too, if the camera's shaky and I sound a little jittery, I apologize. My AC is blowing right on me right now, and it is like being in an ice box right where I'm at. So when I'm not moving, it gets kind of cold. For those of you guys who haven't pulled the heads off these, there's 15 bolts total. You have 10 bolts that are the large ones that go around the cylinder themselves, and then you have these 5 across the top that are the smaller bolts. So it's 15 total. Pop those off, and the head comes off. Got the heads off the motor. Some of the bolts were pretty stuck and didn't want to come, but I got them. Lifters are down there, and here's the cam, and here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 lobes that are bad on the cam, and they are all the outside lobes of each section. So that's a bummer, but it's probably better that I caught it now than caught it later. Well, it's gonna be a long night, so might as well just finish tearing this fucking thing apart. So here we go. Got it on the engine stand. Put the 5.3 motor on the roll stand so I can rotate this bitch and get this rebuilt. So I'm gonna start off with pulling the pistons and rods out. So obviously you're gonna start from the front, go to the back, make sure you mark these. One thing I will say is these are split rods, so they only go on one way and they only are matched to the rod. And what I mean by that is, in case you guys aren't familiar with these rods on these early 5.3 motors and LS1 motors, this being LS1 of course, these rods are actually split from the factory of the machine. So when they go together, the grain structure of the metal matches up perfectly, and there is no actual seam in the rod. It's kind of a cool process. It is so cool, in fact, that I kind of want to show you guys. So I actually have a brand new rod here. This one is for a 5.3 motor, and as you can see, I've had this taken apart a few times. On the inside, there's a split mark there, but right here, you can see no line whatsoever. When you undo the pressure on the bolts, it will start to separate, and if it'll focus for me right there, you can kind of see where there is a line forming right across here. Focus, there you go. There's a line that's right across there. That is where the rod is broken and it comes apart, but there is a little better view of it right there where the bolt's slightly loose. You can see the split in the grain structure, and right there where the bolt's tight, you cannot see a gap at all. So I see why they did this. It's a really cool design in a way. A lot of people hate it, a lot of people like it. I think it's kind of cool. Definitely will say though, these rods definitely do not handle a lot of power. Good for a stock motor, minor upgrades, but if you guys are making lots of horsepower, you definitely want to go with an I-beam or H-beam rod that is forged. Okay, back to this. I'm gonna start undoing the rod bolts front to back and get these pistons out. Okay, so I got the rods and pistons out, and so far it actually looks pretty good. I'll get to the pistons and rods in a minute. As far as the cylinders go, I'll show you guys that when I flip the motor over after I get the crank out. But the cylinders look pretty good. They still have the factory cross hatching in them, and there's a little bit of wear from the skirts of the pistons rubbing against the cylinders, but I think it'll be fine. These motors can't take much more than a little bit of a hone on the 97, 98s. I might not even hone it. If I do, it might just be a touch. All the bearing surfaces on the crank look good. Let's come over to the pistons and the rods. So on a couple of these, there was a little bit of scoring on the skirts. Most of them actually look pretty good. Most of them don't have very little or any, and as far as the bearing surfaces go, those still have the bearings in them, and I mean, there is some wear on some of them. That one actually is probably the worst one with this groove right in here, but most of them just have what I would say would be normal wear for the mileage on the engine. So as far as this goes, looks like so far so good. It's probably not going to need machine work. Well, depends on who you say. Some people would say to do a complete rebuild. I'm going to try and keep this as cheap as possible while still keeping it, you know, professional. So where this block can't really be machined, you can just hone it or put like somewhere around 5/1000 pistons. It depends on the source. Some say hone. We won't get into the measurement details of this motor because I don't want to say without having the specifics off the top of my head, but this particular block, if I remember right, is not like the later LS's where it can go 10 over. This one just can basically take a couple thousandths over. So I prefer not to mess with the block right now, just in case it needs a rebuild later. And I know you can sleeve them. I don't want to even have to deal with that in the future. I would probably try and find another block before I sleeve it, but looks pretty clean so far. I'm going to pull the main caps off and check the crank out, but so far from what I'm seeing, it looks good. Probably just going to end up putting some new bearings in it and putting it back together without pistons or any honing or boring. A lot really depends on how long I'm willing to let this and the car there sit on my hoist. I may just have to pull the car out of the shop for now, put the cradle back on the car, and pull the car out until I get the money to do this. Because I say one thing now, but tomorrow my mind might change. So right now, this may just get a freshening up. Tomorrow, I may want to save up and just go ahead and send this block off to a machine shop, have a professional hone done on it, get some oversized Wiseco pistons and put it back together, but that's up in the air right now. Anyway, enough talk. Back to the final step on this. I realize I don't have the valley cover off this motor yet. That's not a big deal to me. But, well, actually you can't see the valley cover because it's upside down. But regardless, for those of you who don't know, on these LS's, great design with the deep skirt on the block. And you have 6-bolt main caps. So you've got 2 bolts on the side and then your 4 main bolts per cap. So really strong design, excellent design. If you take these apart, just remember you have these side bolts that you've got to take out. One more thing, and the factory did actually number these. So I don't have to bust out my stamps on this. These are all, well, actually that one is numbered too. They just put it on the other side for some reason. But yeah, numbered 1 through 5. So don't have to mark those. And directional wise, I just always usually remember the way that they are stamped. Some guys like to put an arrow on it, but I always remember the way it's stamped is basically that being the top being the front. It's easy for me to remember. All right, the crank is out and it still looks pretty good. The crank has a few, maybe slight imperfections, if you want to call it. The bearings actually look good. I mean, there is wear on them, but I mean, there's nothing here that scares me at all. I have seen a lot worse. So obviously I'm just gonna move forward with this, this build. Gonna have to wait, get some parts ordered for it, but this thing is definitely buildable, definitely salvageable, and gonna move forward and get it done. So I said I was gonna show you guys those cylinders too. Try and get a good view from down here, but most of them look pretty good. It's kind of hard to see the cross hatching in them, but I promise it's there. And they all look pretty decent. I mean, I really don't think I'm gonna have machine work done on this. I've rebuilt worse. That one right there is probably the worst one, and you can kind of see the marks in the cylinder right there. But you can't really feel them, so it would not take much to clean those up at all. And right there you can actually see the cross hatching in the cylinder still, so looks pretty good. Seen a lot worse, seen a lot better, but she's definitely savable, so that's what we're gonna do. Well, that didn't really go to plan, but sometimes things don't. So anyway, that is gonna be the complete teardown of an LS1 motor, and I'll be getting the parts ordered hopefully fairly soon. At the very least, I'll be getting some parts ordered now, some, you know, in a little while. But I will get this thing put back together, and there will be a video showing that in the near future. Until then, I guess I'll just have to do a video on something else. So stay tuned for what that might be. As always, thanks again for watching, and we will see you next time. Goodbye.